Welcome to Off the Record. I am your host, Patrick Lamb, and today my guest hails all the way from Malta. He is a bona fide Portland legend, known for creating landmark events and clubs in the Northwest, including Key Largo, the Bite of Oregon, the Mayor's Ball, Neighbor Fair, and literally hundreds of signature events here in the Northwest. He was also recently inducted into the Oregon Music Hall of Fame for his tireless effort to provide venues for local musicians to play and to be seen by our community. He is a wonderful, fascinating man, and I am proud to call him my friend, Tony DeMicoli. Welcome to the show.
Hey, good morning, Patrick. How am I doing? Okay, thank you. Very well.
Hey, tell us a little bit about Malta, and just, I got a lot of questions leading up to this interview with you on Facebook, and a lot of people just want to know the story of how you came to be here from Malta, and
that little speck in the Mediterranean.
And where exactly? Tell
Malta
for those who don't
south
know.
of Italy, south of Sicily, and north of Africa, right in the middle of the Mediterranean.
So it's hot. It's like, is it like 100 degrees all?
It's 100 degree
100
weather.
degrees weather, like
No, it's
year
moderate
round?
because there's a nice breeze that comes across the Mediterranean, so it keeps it moderate rather than real hot.
Do you remember, what are your earliest memories? What do you
I was
remember
born
about
right
Malta?
at the end of the war. Obviously, I'm 72, so do your math. And our house was bombed during the war. And my parents were living in an air raid shelter. Malta was devastated. As a matter of fact, it was one of the most bombed piece of property in the war because it was so strategic for the Allies. So
It was like a landing spot for
it also had
bombing and air raids and this kind of thing?
It had a deep water seaport, and a dry dock, so it was very strategic. It was the only thing left that the Allies had in the Mediterranean. Anyway, so Malta was devastated, obviously. I mean, everything was bombed, and they're still finding live bombs when they, dig around.
Do you remember the bombs? Do you remember?
No, I was
being
born right
bombed,
at
or-
the end of the war.
Okay.
By my brothers and sisters who were born during the war or were alive during the war, and my parents, obviously. Oh, they remember all that. The air raids.
They remember the air
The
raids.
sirens
vividly.
going off and running to the air raid shelter, and then my grandparents died in a bombing. I lost two of my grandparents during the war and two soon after. So that being said, and I could go on and on because Malta has a lot of history, not only during the war, but, they're finding antiquity dating back to 3000 BC there. Actually, there's a structure that is 500 years older than Stonehenge, similar to Stonehenge.
Wow. Now, what was the point that your parents, I take it your parents picked you up and just, they were, we got to get out of here, we're going to go to the United States?
Was
So
sort of like that, but
how did that work?
my father having 6 kids, and the economy was not that great. As a matter of fact, I'll answer that before I say, my father even bought a minesweeper and tried to do freight between Malta and Europe, and that it was called the Lord Strickland, which, by the way, Jacques Cousteau bought, and it was the first Calypso.
Oh, wow.
My father's ship became the first Calypso ship. Now he's got a most modern one, his son does. Anyway, that failed because nobody was shipping anything at that time.
It was just too dangerous, right?
Well, the war was over, but there was still mines in. As a matter of fact, I just ran into a person who told me that he spent years and years in Malta because the U.S. was sending minesweepers to clean up all the mines that were still around. And that was only up until 10 years ago. They were still finding mines.
And there's a job you don't want.
It got to the point that because during the war, the inhabitants ate everything that walked or crawled or flew. The only thing that saved them is the fact that it's surrounded by water and had a lot of fish. But the water wells were poisoned and all that. So my father decided, wow, I'm going to immigrate to the land of opportunity, which is where the streets are paved in gold and the American dream. And he came to New York.
And how did that American dream pan out when he first got here?
Well, that's a long time ago. For him, my father worked 2, 3, 4 jobs, just enough to make enough money to survive and bring the family over. So we didn't come as a whole family.
Oh, okay.
So there was very little time for me that I actually was growing up with all my siblings.
What are your earliest memories here in the States?
Well, when I came in, first I was only about 9. Came on a ship called the Christopher Columbus, 9.5 days at sea, with my mother. They had to carry her off on a stretcher because she was so seasick.
Oh, wow.
I mean, it was not a big ship.
Like how big? 40 feet? 50 feet?
Bigger than this room.
Oh, okay.
No, it was a ship.
Mm.
But I wouldn't at this stage say no bigger than maybe a 200-footer maybe.
Okay.
It crossed the Atlantic, man.
Mm.
It was not a huge, because a couple of years later I sailed back on the original Queen Mary. Now that ship, I didn't get seasick on.
Okay, so
Yeah.
you're in New York, and then when did you...
Well, I pretty
yeah.
much grew up in New York. I mean, from the time I was 9, 10 years old till I left it when I was about 27.
Did you learn any of your promotion chops while you're in New York? That's a good place to...
Sort
to
of,
learn
kind
some of
of,
that.
yes, because I used to go to the Fillmore East a lot. I lived in the East Village when I was over 21, and hung out at the Fillmore East. My friend worked with Joe's Lights, so I would be able to get in for every show. I used to, go there quite often. Saw a lot of good acts, obviously. They definitely had an influence on me.
Bring us to how you got to
Anyway.
to Portland from the East Coast.
Well, I was working for a company called Bantam Books, and a lot of people that worked for me or with me were Deadheads. And the Grateful Dead was coming to Portland, to New York City, upstate New York. And I thought, wow, it would be nice. I bought a bunch of tickets. I was going to take my friends to see the Dead show, go with them. And a couple of days before, one of them goes, hey, my sister's flying in, and she loves the Grateful Dead. And I went, I just happen to have an extra ticket. Let's take her with us. And we did. And that night she moved in with me, and we lived together for a while, and all she ever talked about was Oregon. And well, the day came that she was like, I'm going.
Are you coming with?
Yeah.
She was like, you coming
Weirdo
with me?
without you.
Yeah.
Okay. And that's sure enough, man. I quit Bantam Books, bought this old post office truck, packed all our belongings, got behind the wheel, and drove off.
So you come to Portland. What was your first impression? Did you like it?
I got a job with Channel 2, KATU.
What did you do for Channel 2?
I started helping building the props for Sinister Cinema in the carpenter room department. Actually, Victor Eyes was wearing my cape, that I happen to have a Dracula cape. And in that show, Victor Eyes was wearing my cape. And I helped build the set, I helped set up the set, and do a little bit of floor directing or learning that aspect of it.
A lot of people want to know, how you got into promotion. And from what I understand, you getting into promotion started with the hitchhiker in the 70s on his way to getting some stained glass. So talk to us about that.
I went back to New York for a while, and a friend of mine taught me how to do stained glass. And we did some great work in New York City. And then I came back to Oregon, and I started doing the stained glass. And I was caretaking 80 acres in Jewel, living in a cabin, doing my stained glass and selling it in Cannon Beach at the White Bird Gallery, and taking commissions and consignments.
They have so many. For those of you who don't know about Cannon Beach, it has many
galleries.
different art galleries and stained glass and different things. So it's very
a
very
lot of
popular
artists.
thing.
It's a very artistic
So you're
community.
doing that.
And then one day I needed to come to Portland to get some supplies. And I was driving in, and there was a hitchhiker. I picked him up, and we talked, and we talked, and we talked. And he told me that his buddy, Richard Vidan, had this little cafe restaurant on 10th and Everett called The Long Goodbye. And he was really looking to have somebody help him develop it into a nightclub. So I went, I should go talk to him, and I did, and he hired me right on the spot. And we started with developing the music scene there, and we even had the theater downstairs. Richard was more into the theater because he was part of Storefront Theater. So he loved the playback theater downstairs, and I took care of the upstairs.
What did you learn from that whole experience, that initial experience of working at the Long Goodbye, that you think translated into like what you did at Key Largo and then at all the other clubs and experiences that you events that you managed?
Well, learning the restaurant bar business was an experience in itself. That took a lot of time and energy, and of course the business side of it. But what really kept my passion was the music, and finding these young, talented, like the first one, of course, was Billy Rancher right off the bat. He was barely 18, fresh out of high school, and his band's called the Malchicks. Wow, And then it went on and on. Finding young, raw talent with the passion. They were not yet, okay, we're in. They were, yeah. And of course, we developed a music scene that supported original music. And of course, that opened up a lot of floodgates.
Because a lot of people, like a lot of bands, when they get these opportunities in these clubs, I mean, they're really, going after a little piece of their dream, and they leave it a little bit in that club every night. And so, a lot of people are asking, they want to know about Key Largo, because Key Largo was such a legendary spot. And I remember playing in there with different bands just as a side guy when I was coming up, with like Little Gregory and the Intolerables. I sat in with Curtis Elgato a few times. But talk to your audience about what Key Largo meant, how you came to manage and run it and own it, and just whatever you want to talk about. They want to know.
After the Long Goodbye, which became La Bamba, but it was the medieval inn and part of the hindquarter, and had closed down, and I was recommended to take over that place and turn it into a music club. And La Bamba, in 1981 and through 83, was another. I mean, we developed a lot of good acts there, not only national acts, but a lot of local acts got their, first step into a bigger room, a bigger audience, and it was a really happening scene for a long time, till the building got sold from underneath me and I lost my lease. Then I went around managing a couple of little places, Aldo's and Chuck's for a while, and Saks Front Avenue to help Tom Oling out a couple of days a week, and managed a couple of bands at the same time. And then I got the call from Tom Nash, and he invited me down to Key Largo and hired me as a general manager.
Well, now, there's some huge acts that you've given some of their first shows, like Sheryl Crow, the Neville Brothers, Katie Lang, all played some of their first shows at your clubs. Talk to us about just like, did you know immediately with these acts, or was it a surprise that they became so successful?
Well, some of them, I did on my own, but I depended also on the other promoters. Like some of the shows, like Sheryl Crow was Monkey brought her in, okay, and of course I had the final say. But Steve Reichman was bringing some shows in, Double T was doing some shows there. Almost every other promoter was bringing shows to Key Largo because they knew it was going to be a home run. I mean, Joan Jett played there. I could go on and on with so many name. Wynton Marsalis played there.
Tell us like something amazing, and then tell us like a real shit show.
Well, the latter I'll leave hanging, but Sun Ra was probably one of the shows that always left me walking higher.
Walking on air.
Yeah, walking on air.
Well,
and then hanging out with him and talking, he always gave you that energy that made you, whoa.
Now, being a promoter can be, because I do some of it. Sometimes it can be a very thankless and just tedious and just endless hours. And there's always something. It's kind of like having kids, because there's always something else you can be doing for it, and it can be kind of a thankless job. Who are some of the like the unsung heroes you think that you worked with behind the scenes that really helped made things happen in the 80s, you know? Or was it just you?
No. No, it wasn't just me. No. There was a few others, and I have to be honest with some names that might escape me right this minute. Because there were other people like Hickory, Nicholas Hill, and besides the other promoters that I had already mentioned, you know, that came and said, hey, how about this act? How about this act? You know, let's bring this in. You know, they collaborated in bringing in shows, you know, including like Joan Jett, which I remember her saying, wow, it was kind of nice to have the audience right here instead of 10 feet away.
Did you have any, like, just bona fide mentors that took you aside and like, hey, Tony, you know,
No.
No. There's not a lot of,
Well,
yeah.
you know, I guess I have to separate that question by saying took me aside. Not many did that.
Right.
Maybe I wasn't as accessible.
Part of the business is sort of keeping your cards close because that's how
The
you
way
make
it
money,
kind of worked
right?
out is that I put myself in that position rather than somebody going, come here, I want to be, you know, your mentor, as you put it. But I ran in the circles of people that are in the know. That's why the 7 or 8 of us started the Portland Music Association, which, you know, helped promote the Mayor's Ball and raise money for charities. Because I knew the people that, you know, like Buck Munger and those, you know, David Lycan and people like that who were part of that, they were the so-called industry professionals at the time. So, you know, I hung out with them a bit when I can. And, yeah, you know, we shared ideas, but I don't think it was more like, let me take you under my wing. Of all of them, Buck Munger was, I think, very supportive of me from day one.
You know, and you bring up a fantastic event, which I never actually got a chance to experience, but is legendary here in the Northwest, which is the Mayor's Ball. I never played at but everybody talks about it, and people still are like, hey, let's bring it back. I'm like, can you just give us a good overview of what the Mayor's Ball was, the beneficiaries, the artists that play there, and how long it went, that kind of thing?
Well, it started out as Bud Clark's inaugural ball.
We had like Dan Reed play there. Network.
Well, he played one of them, obviously, and you know,
the Crazy Eights.
And you know, I was Dan's first manager, so that was, and I booked it.
Oh wow!
You know, yeah, I was his first.
Did you help him get that gig with the Rolling Stones opening up for them?
No, that was after I released him, and he went on with Bill Graham. You know, from me, there was a little bit of a transition time between I managed them to when Bill Graham managed them.
Okay. There's kind of a period where you didn't have management?
There was like people who thought they were, but maybe they weren't. And the record label got involved, and then he signed up with Bill Graham, which I recommended to him. He had a couple of options between him and other promoters.
What a talented guy, right? Dan Reed.
Still is.
Just
yeah.
amazing. I mean, he's coming back New Year's Eve to play the Governor's Ball.
Right, he's going to come there for that.
Just a great guy, talented, very creative. So, did you manage some other artists at the time?
Well, I started a company, integrated management company, and Dan was definitely the first, and Jack Charles was on it for a while. Raya, I helped John Bauer with Johnny and the Distractions for a while through the management company, and I had Alf Ryder, me, and we had this attorney show, forgot her last name, the three of us, you know, managed these bands, because I was still doing Key Largo, so they were the hands-on with the management company.
Oh, okay. So, and then the Mayor's Ball. So tell us
The
more.
Mayor's Ball.
Back
It
to the Mayor's
developed
Ball.
after the inaugural ball, which retired as campaign
How
fund.
big was it? Like how many bands? Where did they
Well, the
hold?
initial one, you know, which they were always at the Coliseum. The initial one, maybe 20, 30 bands. And we ended up with doing one time, in one day, 72 acts.
By all accounts, the 80s and during that time was a really booming scene, at least in terms of clubs and so forth. How is the music scene different now, do you think?
I don't come out to Portland like I used to or hang out in clubs. So I could only go by from what I hear or what I see on Facebook, so probably. But I don't hear very, like, I mean, it seems like the people who go to clubs now are happy with what they get. And I don't think they're comparing it to what it was. Some of us do, some of us from that time.
Do you think there was more original music back then?
No, I definitely don't
No?
think so.
Okay.
No, I'm a very big supporter of original music. I booked the Portland Roads Festival for 31 years.
Wow.
And I focused on finding bands that play original music. Yes, I had to mix it up and try and, please the crowds that we have. But my main focus was finding original music.
You're busy now. You've booked the Rose Festival, the Washington County Fair, blues cruises. You worked at the Waterfront Blues Festival. You work out at what's the place? Tell us about some of the stuff that you're doing currently.
Well, I'm not doing as much currently as I did. I mean, you mentioned a few, but I had done Neighbor Fair. As a matter of fact, it's funny. I just saw the release for the Rock and Roll Marathon. I had booked bands for them. A band every mile for 13 miles. I did the Rock and Roll Marathon. I booked that. I booked the Peace Festival. And most recently, since the passing of a very dear friend of mine, Rhonda Kennedy, I've been remembering the Tibetan Festival, So there would be many other festivals. One, the Wakanushpam Festival, the Native American celebration that we did on the waterfront. I literally had the stage built half in the water, half out. I would love to still be having a venue to book bands in, an event, a festival, or even a club, because I love to promote original music and help develop it. But I don't have that right now. I'm not booking as much as I'm doing production. I'm starting a consulting firm. I got this little thing in the back of my head about starting a label. I'm still in the mix. But I'm still working the Blues Cruises production, and I work out at Edgefield.
Oh, Edgefield. That's what I was.
Concerts
That's what I was.
there.
You work all the major concerts out there at Edgefield.
Yeah, I joke about it. I'm the doorman. And I like it because I get to see people I haven't seen for a while. And I do well, and they know that. So
Now you moved out to the boondocks, like out in
the woods.
in the woods.
On the mountain.
And you moved your family out there. Tell us as much as you like to, as you're comfortable with, about your family. When you moved out there, why you moved out to Mount Hood.
Right after I sold Key Largo to Dan Reed, I got a phone call from Al Salazar, who used to have the Pine Street Theater, and I did do some shows there. Bigger shows, I put him into the Pine Street. And I helped him develop the Pine Street Theater and bringing in his own shows, right? So I got to know Al Salazar. So he invited me up to his restaurant on the mountain to have dinner with him. Oh, that sounds nice. Let's go. Because soon before I sold Key Largo, I got married, right? So anyway, we went up there, had dinner, and Al kind of convinced me to come in up there and revitalize his restaurant up there and turn it into a music venue. And he verbally made me a deal that was like, oh, all right. You could live upstairs and run it downstairs and bring in the bands and blah, blah, blah. And I went, hey, all right. Yeah, okay. A year or two doing this, and it started to take off, but the deal started to change, and then Tom and Tracy came by and bought it out, and they're doing a great job with it.
New York to Welch's, Oregon. That's quite a contrast.
From New York, and my wife finding out she was pregnant, we decided where's the best place to raise a child. And we did. And she just turned 18. So that means she was conceived on the mountain, born on the mountain, lived all her life on the mountain. I don't think it was a bad thing.
What would you like to do more of?
I definitely, in my heart, would love to be booking, because I do run into some really good talent that it's been always in my heart, even. to help, to develop him, to give him a chance, give him a leg up, give him a gig, give him, help him. I've always done that. I've been doing it for 40 years. 31 years at the Rhodes Festival. I must have booked a couple of thousand different acts, some of which you might hear once and some kept going,
For those of you who don't know, Tony was inducted into the Oregon Music Hall of Fame for that very reason, for just for his heart and his caring and love about supporting new artists and booking artists and supporting the music scene. So we are so grateful to have you on the show.
Okay,
Thanks so much.
buddy.
Thank you so much.